And you know what you get when you don't get what you want? Experience. At NetApp, my claim to fame was taking an account from 16 million to 98 million in a year, right? How do you become knowledgeable about AI and get yourself comfortable in those conversations? You have to have some idea what is RAG, what is inferencing, what do those technologies do, what do they mean for the customers, and then generate enough interest in what you're doing and your value proposition as it relates to AI so that you can bring in the subject matter experts. But the vast majority of enterprises that we're selling to are still really just dabbling and trying to figure out. Now, they've been using machine learning for a while, but what they haven't really done is figured out Agentic AI and Gen AI and how they're going to use that. And everybody's craving knowledge.
I was thinking about what's my intro for Scott Carter, because you are something of a legend. It's certainly for me as well, Scott. And so, first reason why you're a bit of a legend, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the first trips I ever made to Silicon Valley was to train your teams. Right, so you invited me over there. We didn't know one another, and I've done a bunch of those things, but never over there. So the pressure was on me, and you said, "Oh, well, really want to focus on mindset as well." And during that session, we did focus a lot on mindset and staying calm under pressure. But during that session, what was apparent was I learned so much from you. You weren't just kind of in and out the room as sales leader. You were there the whole time, front of the room, literally helping your team, coming up with creative ideas about how to kind of get through the door with some really big enterprise customers, weren't they? Very difficult to reach. And so that's the first thing. So the learning, thank you for the learning. Second thing, I guess linked to that, is you said to me, let me back up. I'd been struggling to know what to call my advanced prospecting program. It didn't really have a name at the time. It was getting called all different types of things. And you summed it up. You said to me, I think towards the end of those 2 days we were together, and you said, Ben, if I was going to use one word to describe what you're teaching us, it would be empathy. Mm-hmm. And so on the plane back, I was like, I think I'm just going to call the program Prospecting with Empathy. Still today, I don't know how many years ago that was, still today, the program is called Prospecting with Empathy. And the final thing is you then invited me to your house. I've turned up at your house, getting off bleary-eyed, getting off that long flight. Not once have I turned up bearing a gift of a bottle of wine. So next time, I must right that wrong. So you're great.
Bringing wine to my house is like bringing sand to the beach. There's plenty here. So anyway, it's so I think, my couple of things that I've done that make me a little different is one, I started a video surveillance software company. We got a Series A, but we didn't get a Series B. And you know what you get when you don't get what you want? Experience. So I got a lot of experience doing a failed startup. And, at NetApp, my claim to fame was taking an account from 16 million to 98 million in a year. An account where they were trying to take us to zero. And I took over from my predecessor and was able to do a little marriage counseling on what was clearly a broken relationship. And I fixed the relationship between the two companies. And in the process, moved the revenue moved from 16 million going to zero to 98 million the following year. So those were my two kind of things I think that are notable. And I started in management when I was 19 years old, and I was running a pizza parlor with 50 employees and everybody. And I did all the hiring and firing and inventory and scheduling. And if we were out of something, it was my fault. If somebody didn't show up, it was my problem. And, I did that for about a year before I went back to college. So learned a lot.
Yeah.
just
The
managing
lot.
low income people. It's a lot easier to manage salespeople that make north of $250,000 to $500,000 a year.
Yeah.
They're pretty good at dealing with a lot of their own problems. I don't need to worry about if their kid's sick. That doesn't become my problem, um, like it does when you're running a restaurant. Uh, but you do have a different set of challenges about how do you motivate people like that, and how do you keep them focused.
Yeah, yeah. I had a job in a pizza restaurant, kind of like, when you just like need some money, and
Mm-hmm.
first jobs. I was still at school, and the owners. I learned not just about pizzas, and I was like I wasn't even making the pizzas. I wasn't at that. I did not attain the level of making the pizzas. I was cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned about cleaning kitchens, but I'll never forget it. These two, the couple that ran the pizza restaurant, they were nice to each other when the customers were there. They were really great, smiling, getting on. I thought, oh, they seem like really cool people, like really just joking with each other. Soon as the last customer left that restaurant and they locked the doors, they were screaming at each other. It was just like, I was just like, what? So it's almost like that was my first proper learning, I think, about relationships. But is that hang on, I think I might have my Teams open. Have you got your
I've got my
notifications?
yeah.
So so look, we're now in the AI world. And let's get on to advice for B2B sellers in this podcast episode as well. But what's the shifts that you've had to make as kind of sales leader, as we've just very rapidly gone into this completely new world of customers thinking about how to adopt this new technology?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to get your teams to really focus in on it and not be afraid of it, and to start learning about it, right? How do you become knowledgeable about AI and get yourself comfortable in those conversations? You have to have some idea, what is RAG, what is inferencing, what do those technologies do, what do they mean for the customers, right? So, and understanding the differences so you can have a base level conversation, and then generate enough interest in what you're doing and your value proposition as it relates to AI, so that you can bring in the subject matter experts. So that's when you do the real learning, is when you bring in an SME into a meeting with your customers and you hear that dialogue. That's when I do my best learning. That's when I really begin to understand the technology, is when I'm in front of a customer with somebody that knows what they're talking about and the customer's asking questions. And the more of those meetings that you can get, the faster you come up to speed, because you'll come out of those meetings with questions for yourself and for the SME that you didn't want to ask in front of the customer, so that you get smarter as well and you know where to do your research. And so the biggest challenge is really just, starting to understand what the technology is and how it works and what the different things are. What is a model? What does that mean?
Yeah.
That term. What does it mean to be, okay, when you do RAG to a model, how's that different than fine tuning, or is it? And it is different, but it's not hugely different, right? And then once you start using it, inferencing, and how does that look, and what are the requirements around inferencing? Because inferencing needs to be close to real time, because most of the time inferencing is being used to drive your car or to respond to a chatbot. So it's got to be pretty fast, right? People don't want to wait, especially a car can't afford to
Yeah.
wait. So that's got to be
We don't.
really, really fast, right? Chatbot can be a little slower, be sure a little patient for an answer, but they're not patient if you're driving a car and you miss a stop sign. So inferencing is understanding that and how that's going to work, and then how does it get better, right? On some of your episodes, you've talked about the AI training itself and learning from its own mistakes as it it gets more experience doing things. And so, I think the key thing is for, salespeople, whatever it is you're selling that relates to AI, if you're not super familiar with the entire industry, get yourself familiar and then know enough to get your SMEs in front of your customers. And that's where you do your real learning.
Yeah, and there's some great points in there. The first point you said is get the team focused on it, and and go learn. And someone asked me yesterday, said, "Oh, how did you come up with the idea for AI outcomes, the podcast?" I thought, well, I realised I had to learn. I didn't know enough about it. I didn't know what RAG meant. I didn't know what inferencing meant this time last year. And so that realization dawns, and if it hasn't dawned yet and you're in B2B technology sales, it needs to dawn quite quickly. And so I just knew I had to research. And in your parlance, that's get focused on it. And I thought, well, hang on, I'm literally sat here in my office doing this research about what different customers, how they're using AI. And I thought, I may as well just record this because this is actually going to be useful as a resource for salespeople as they start focusing and learning. And then the next part of that process is getting in front of the customer and then not having the confidence. But you've got to get those first meetings. You've got to get through those first meetings because you can't always have a subject matter expert attached to you, especially in AI. Nobody's got enough resource to come to every single meeting. What's your experience with your sales team in that respect?
Well, so I'm actually really fortunate right now in that we have a lot of SMEs. So finding somebody that knows more about it than our customers do is actually not that hard, right? Because most of our customers, aside from the companies that are very, very deep in this, living in Silicon Valley, you've got companies like Meta and OpenAI that are, a mile deep into the AI. But the vast majority of enterprises that we're selling to are still really just dabbling and trying to figure out. Now, they've been using machine learning for a while. So a lot of people understand machine learning and how they can leverage that to improve and automate workflows and that type of, business workflows or manufacturing workloads. But what they haven't really done is figured out Agentic AI and Gen AI and how they're going to use that. And everybody's craving knowledge. And if you go and you help them, people want to get in front of the smartest people in the room around as it relates to Agentic AI or just Gen AI in general. And that's why GTC is next week. It's going to be huge. It's here in San Jose. And, there's going to be a lot of people coming because, especially in the enterprise, because they're craving knowledge. I kind of view Gen AI as kind of a lot like the internet in 1996, 97, right? I mean, history doesn't repeat itself, but it kind of rhymes. And right now, everybody's focused on NVIDIA, which is kind of like the Cisco, and Netscape, which is probably OpenAI, right? And the companies that really do well with AI haven't started yet, right? Amazon hasn't opened yet. Google hasn't started yet. Yahoo is number one. And everybody was just putting up, basically brochures on the web, and that's what the internet was in 1996, was a bunch of brochures. And the real evolution is going to come as people start thinking about what are the outcomes that we can deliver now, and as they get deeper into it, somebody's going to come up with some innovations that create the next Google or the next Amazon.
Yeah, that's incredible to think. And of course, then there was no iPhone, there was no, there's just nothing. Amazon, you could have bought a Amazon share for nothing, right? In those days, and that's when I started my sales career at Computer Center. Was in December 1998. That's when I started. So we've actually had the benefit of seeing
Yeah.
Lots of people will be a lot younger listening to this podcast than we are, of seeing that unbelievable change. And as you say, Google wasn't even a company then. So what's going to be created out of AI is going to be really interesting. The other thing that you said was that customers craving knowledge and want to learn, and how do we apply this thing? And that's really coming through as well as I work with sales teams. The best way to get in front of AI decision makers or stakeholders, that's what we call actual human beings in our sales world, isn't it? The actual humans that are thinking about how to use AI is to help them learn, bring insight. That's what they're craving at the moment, as you say. So you're finding that your sales team, if they can kind of build that initial contact, they're getting their meetings, and the customers are really willing to hear your perspective, and it's great you've got lots of subject matter expertise
Yeah.
to bring into that. It's very supportive.
Yeah. And I think, the training that you do, right, around prospecting with empathy is exactly what I would encourage people to incorporate into their prospecting methodology as they do AI, because they're getting 1,000 inquiries a day from people.
Mm-hmm.
They crave knowledge, but they don't crave being sold to, right? And so you've got to approach them with, here, I'm going to educate you. I'm not going to sell you something, or I'm going to enable your company to do something. And this is what we do that's different, right? I'm not going to sell you something. So you have to try to understand the problem from the customer's perspective, before you just start, show up and throw up with a bunch of AI buzzwords, because that's not going to endear you to the senior level people that you really want to sell, that can write the checks.
Yeah, it's just, the old way wasn't working anyway, and the old way of just reaching out to people and just being lazy and trying to get a meeting just definitely isn't going to work now. And one
Yeah.
of the things that we're finding, and I was encouraging all the sellers that come into my program, which is, it's not so much even training, it's a workshop, it's focused on execution, is we go take a look at what has the enterprise or commercial customer already announced.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much all of the customers we are end customers we're taking a look at in terms of prospecting, they've all announced AI initiatives. Some have deployed their AI assets. You can, if it's a B2C company, you can literally go and use their AI assets, maybe on their website or on their app. It's there, but I think where it needs to go is into the kind of ERP layer, as I was talking to Thomas Odenwald about this last week, into the ERP layer, and really integrate generative AI into the customer's business, and so it becomes part of their business. And that is just going to be huge as a transformation. But it sounds like most of your customers are still on my AI maturity spectrum that I created. They're in the exploratory. They've got the vision, but they're in that exploratory stage right now.
Yeah. And even with, so generally I sell to pretty large companies, and even within large companies, you'll have multiple people at different stages. There won't be just one. I mean, if you're selling to a Starbucks or a Nike or a Costco, or, a big company like that, there's going to be multiple AI initiatives in multiple places, right? So they might have one around developing code in one part, because everybody writes software these days for something internally. And then they might have a chat bot, and then they might have, some sort of recommendation engine or fraud detection. There's usually multiple projects going on at the same time, and they're often being run by different groups, with a different focus. And so it's it's a great time to be prospecting because there's a lot of people open to it. It's a hard because you can't have a one size fits all approach, right? Because what you need for a chat bot is different than when you're dealing with code. I mean, there's some overlap there, but it's not 100%.
And that brings us on to another topic that I wanted to kind of get your view on, which is there almost seems to be an oversimplification in the sales world about whether will the customer scale out their AI on public cloud, or is the data center back and will they build their own infrastructure? And I think it's an oversimplification. That's my initial view. I really want to get your take on this because you're much closer than I am, and it's just not going to be that straightforward. I'm going to do, and you just said it. There's going to be different use cases. We're going to do different things depending on what that use case is. What's your perspective on that old kind of question of are we going to do all this in public cloud or are we going to buy all the infrastructure? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's going to be both. I think the hybrid cloud, there was a period of time where everybody thought everything was going to be public cloud. Before that, everybody assumed everything was going to be on-prem. Then the public cloud showed up. Now, we're going to do all public cloud. And now what people have realized is the public cloud is kind of like a car rental agency, right? And what it does really well is, hey, listen, I want to go drive a Tesla for a couple of days. I can go and rent a Tesla at Hertz for a couple of days and then turn it back in, and that's great. And you get that experience, right? You get some knowledge and you learn something about the car. And the car is available, so you can go and you can show up. Right now, the public cloud, the GPUs are available. So you go there because that's where they are. And when you're doing certain activities where you have a large burst of activity, if you're doing this training and you need a whole bunch of GPUs for a week, that's perfect. If you're doing inferencing, where you're going to be dealing with, and it's a chat bot, and you think you're going to have a pretty steady state, that's probably on-prem, right? So what on-prem does really well is, like, if you're going to drive 30 miles a day to work, 220 work days a year, the on-prem model works really well for that. It doesn't deal well with huge bursts. So if you think you might have a 10x or 100x burst, that's the stuff that you want to have in the public cloud. But if you're doing like a code generator or code, Q&A for, software development, that's probably something where you're going to have a pretty predictable workload, 7x24. And that's something that you're probably going to want to do in-house or on-prem. So it's really going to be a function of where's the GPUs available. Once we get GPU availability and saturation to a certain point, then it just becomes a financial conversation of, do I need a lot of burstability? Because if I do, then the public cloud is going to end up being cheaper. If it's a pretty steady state workload, my on-prem is going to be cheaper. And that's how I think the enterprises, that's what enterprises have figured out, and that's what they're doing. And that's why so many companies are looking to repatriate cloud workloads. IDC said 80% of companies are looking to repatriate some cloud workloads. Now, right. They're not looking to repatriate 100%, but it's moving from cloud first to cloud smart, right? And how do I have a cloud smart strategy? And AI is just one of those workloads that they're going to have to figure out what's the smart way to do it. You don't want to set up, if you need really fast responses, you're probably going to want to use a public cloud in Brazil, right? And not run it out of your data center in the US. And so data centers in Brazil and on the edge are going to be pretty popular for some people, for latency reasons.
Yeah, that's really important, isn't it? That latency, the need or the criticality of latency as you move from training into inferencing, and we can't have when I think of latency, I always think about lag. This thing can't be laggy
Mhm.
especially if it's driving your car, right? Autonomously. So so you've kind of got then, if I was going to break this down, you kind of got the old decision that companies were making. Like I remember when one of the first examples I saw this, where I was like, oh right, now I get it, was Dropbox. So Dropbox just needed to scale like almost vertically as that business grew through across the globe, and they didn't have any choice. They had to use public cloud. There just was there was no choice. They couldn't build it fast enough. And then as their business levels kind of topped out and peaked and became more stable, I guess, and then they had a more stable workloads going on, they started bringing some of those workloads back to on-prem as, into their infrastructure. So that was then when public cloud came about. So there's still that dynamic, but then you've got this new dynamic, which is around latency as these big companies move from training to now using the AI, which is inferencing. And then you mentioned RAG, retrieval augmented generation, term I've had to get to know. I didn't know that term this time last year. How are you seeing, and the RAGs being used when the AI is inferencing and actually delivering the answers on the chat bot to the end
Yeah,
customers?
it's
How are you
RAG.
seeing? How do you kind of structure that so it's more straightforward for a seller to kind of go, oh right, now I understand.
Well, what my understanding of RAG is, you just take one of these big models and then you customize it for your own knowledge, and you make it specific to your company. And if you're doing code generation, you probably want to do you train you take one of the code generation models, you customize it for the work that you're doing, and then you're going to want that one on prem, because that's all of your software development and that's your most valuable data, right? So
Right.
there the inferencing is going to happen on prem. If you're doing a chat bot, they're using the public cloud and putting the chatbot out, that model that you've created, to do the inferencing. If you put that out on the edge, um, you're going to lower your latency, and people are going to have a better experience talking on your website, which is essentially what they're doing.
Hmm.
Um, and you did a great, in one of your prior episodes, you did a very interesting, where the agentic AI handed people off to each other, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
that was,
great.
that's where things are going, right? And the AI is going to know when to pass it to another AI agent, or it actually needs to send it to a real person. But that kind of dialogue, you're going to need pretty good response times in order for that to feel authentic and to feel real, and to feel comfortable for people actually having that conversation.
Yeah, and that's why you couldn't just implement ChatGPT to be your chatbot, because ChatGPT isn't trained on your business, and so you might use Meta or you might use a variant of ChatGPT, but the retrieval augmented generation, the retrieval part, as I understand it, is where
Mhm.
the AI is going to retrieve knowledge about your own enterprise, your
Right.
company, your customer services data, your
It's going to customize
line
the
of
model for
business,
you.
right?
It's going to customize that model for you.
Yeah,
Whatever that model, that higher level model does, it's going to customize it specifically for your language. You put in all of your user manuals, so now it knows all of your user manuals and can provide chat-based tech support,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because it now knows everything in your manuals.
Yeah, that's yeah, and so and it's been that, and hence the training. And I want to
Mhm.
come on to data. There's a couple of things I want to come on to, which is data I want to ask you about compliance and regulatory issues around data. Because if I was a C-suite executive, I'd be getting concerned about where is my data going and how am I going to have my guardrails around it? Is it oversharing? I did the episode on Microsoft Copilot, and so many of, and it's not the technology. It's never the technology. It's the process. But what about compliance? And then you also mentioned GPU availability. Now, the company that you work for, Hewlett Packard Enterprise, are now shipping Blackwell chips and liquid cooled compute technology. But you mentioned GPU availability, and I want to get your view on that. That if I'm running an enterprise, what risks are there around availability? And because you said, well, maybe I have to go to public cloud because I can get my GPUs there. So let's go. I tell you, let's go GPU availability, and then let's double click on compliance and regulatory and the data side of it.
Yeah. So the lead time on GPUs changes every couple of days. And right now, if you want a Blackwell system, I don't know what the lead time is today, but it's not shipping next week. And so the great thing about the public cloud is you can fail fast, right? And you can get on it. You can find some GPUs available. The problem is in the public cloud, the data scientists find some GPUs available, and then their data is in US East, and the GPUs are available in Europe, and all of a sudden their data is going across the Atlantic, and not only are they being charged for the GPUs, they're being charged for the network traffic, and it gets real expensive real fast. So the great thing about the public cloud is it makes it very cheap to fail fast.
Right.
And then if you're like Box and you're successful, then you got to figure out, okay, now I need to cost optimize. And that's usually a blend of the public cloud and an on-prem solution. So you get your kind of your base workload on-prem, and you try to mitigate that. Yeah. And then your second question was around data classification and data management and compliance. And that's actually the biggest challenge for enterprises, I think.
Right.
And I think that's what's got everybody the most scared. There is no easy way that I know of to go through a whole lot of unstructured data, because that's what most of the stuff ends up being, and finding a way to put rails on it. So most companies are creating a center of excellence. And that's actually one of the things you should be finding out in your customers is, do they have a center of excellence? Because if they haven't created one yet, that tells you a little bit about where they are on the maturity scale. So, and how long they've had a center of excellence and how well staffed it is. And then what are they doing around data classification? Because what you don't want to do is when you do RAG, you want to make sure that the data that goes in there is stuff that you're okay, the recipients seeing, right?
Yeah.
So if RAG inadvertently uses all of the CEO's emails in their training, all of a sudden stuff that's in the CEO's email may be in responses, and that could be a problem. And so that's where you really have to think about, or companies need to spend time classifying their data and figuring it out. And I think that's probably the biggest reason so many of these projects don't get off the ground in production, because the data, the training data, they're scared of using, because they don't really know what's in there and what might end up being exposed to the public.
Yeah, and that's happened, hasn't it? And we've got anecdotal evidence of it. Who's going to go public with that? But on the episode I did about Microsoft Copilot and oversharing, the example the Microsoft partner used was a investment bank where they implemented Copilot, just as many organizations have done. Right, it's a great tool, and the Copilot They thought they'd set up their guardrails and had their data classified, but the co-pilot found some information, and it was in like an obscure place, like a Teams group. So it didn't go into the CEO's email file, but in the Teams group, there was an HR group, I think, who had a spreadsheet, as HR folks will have, with everybody's salaries details on it. What am I going to do as your employee if you give me Copilot? I want to know what the guy next to me is being paid, right? I'm searching for everyone's salary details. Maybe I don't even like working for your company, Scott. I'm going to go digging around in my new AI tool. And of course, up came all of the salary details and a whole bunch of emails. So yeah, I just wonder how many times that's already happened and we just don't even know about it, and how many companies don't even it's happened to who don't even know about it, and they're like at risk now, right?
Yeah, and they don't. Yeah, and they don't even know that it's out there, and that's why I try to create outcomes. Get my sellers to think about outcomes specific, where the data set that they would use is pretty controlled, right? So when you think about a software development, this is all of your software code, and this is your environment for software development, and you've got a pretty good boundaries on that.
Right.
And so it's unlike a general purpose, where you're grabbing data from Teams and emails. That's where things get pretty dangerous, I think. And if you're doing a chat bot for your tech support organization, you just give them all your tech support documents. And those are good. Those are clean. So if you're dealing with a company that's not very mature, think about projects that you can help them with that have a pretty good source of training data that doesn't have a lot of risk tied to it.
Yeah, make a start somewhere where they're going to learn, get some outcome from it. But it's a safer. It keeps them safe.
Yeah, by its very nature. Right?
Yeah, and the ethical considerations are also powerful, aren't they? I saw one company who were using I can't remember which model it was to review. It was in hiring and recruitment, and they were hiring for a whole bunch of roles, and the AI was reviewing resumes as they came in and determining, yes, this person gets put forward onto a long list of candidates, or this person doesn't. And that AI had been trained on the company's historic data, but the company's historic data was biased.
Right.
And so it wasn't the AI's fault. It had been trained on biased data.
Yeah.
And they started. And then here we go. We see all the resumes come in, and they're all for, the types of people we've always hired. And so you've got this ethical consideration, and that seems quite new. I don't think organizations have really had to cope with that before when it comes to implementing like new systems and stuff like that. AI, there's a lot that can go wrong, isn't there?
There is, and I think we all have biases. Hopefully, most of us have just unconscious biases, but they're still there. And companies, especially companies like HPE that are basically 100 years old, have 100 years of biases from all of the things that have all of the social trends, and so their data is going to reflect some of those biases. And so that's so you got to be very conscientious about what the project is and what your data set, what you're hoping to achieve. And again, that's why I go back to like code development and tech support chatbots, where there's inherently very little risk of bias in that outcome.
Yeah,
I
yeah. It's
think your observation in your last couple of episodes around Europe being more concerned about negative outcomes, and America is full steam ahead and not worried about it. It's going to be interesting to see how those two clash over the next 5 years.
yeah, yeah. It feels like it needs both, doesn't it? It's got to be, yeah. The mandate is there that the human's got to be involved and as oversight. And as I say to salespeople that I work with all the time, it's governance. It always was for implementing ERP systems. All those SAP and Oracle implementations over the years. It was not the technology that was the problem. It was the governance, and the governance is the human being in the room. The governance now for AI programs is the oversight, and that means the human being, and that needs to be a team effort, right? So I think governance is going to be really important. I'm just keeping an eye on time as well. I know you've got a busy day ahead of you, Scott. Let's get on to advice for sales. I think you opened up today the podcast about we've got to be researched. You've got to get focused on AI. You can't just start approaching customers without doing your best to understand them. So we know research and having an attitude of right sales as a seller. I need to learn and grow now, and and it's going to feel a bit scary. And you mentioned confidence as well. What would be top three things that you would say to one of your sellers if they said to you, "Hey, Scott, this AI thing, I'm feeling really uncomfortable about approaching my customers about it. I just want to get my SME to do it." What would your advice be for that seller?
Well, so you're going to be a dinosaur very quickly if you don't embrace and learn everything you can about what's going on in AI, because it's going to change everything. If you're in technology sales, B2B technology sales, and you're not embracing this and at least dabbling with the tools that are available to us today to help us write emails, and whether it's Grammarly or Agent Force or Copilot, if you're not using some of those tools to kind of get your head around how this technology works and how you can use it, you're going to go the way of the typewriter. And so that's my first observation. So embrace the change. I actually think this is probably one of the most exciting times to be in B2B sales since the dawn of the internet, because so much is going to change. And you're really going to see a separation between sales athletes and sales, people that just, you tell them what to say and they repeat it again and again and again, right? You've got to be creative. Not every problem is going to be a nail. And so if all you know how to do is use a hammer, you're going to be in trouble, right? You got to figure out a hammer, a screwdriver, a lathe. A whole lot of tools are coming at you now that weren't available a decade ago or 5 years ago. And you're going to have to figure out how to use them. And our customers are going to have to figure out how to use them, because whoever gets out in front on this, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to be, there's going to be winners and losers. I don't think there's any companies in the Dow that have been in the Dow Jones for 100 years anymore, right? GE was the longest running one, and they got kicked out not too long ago because they just didn't make that transition, one technology transition. And so it's very important that you go to shows like this, that you're listening, that you're, by virtue of the fact that you're listening to this show, you're actually showing curiosity and you're trying to learn, and stick with that. NVIDIA has a lot of free training that you can get off their website. And that helps a lot of people as well.
Yeah, and your learning curve, what I found is your learning curve is going to be super steep we're not trying and I should say to all B2B technology sellers, nobody's expecting you to be a subject matter expert on AI. Not ever, not ever. But you need to get you need to get off ground zero with it. You need that basic knowledge, and hence this podcast, right? And you mentioned one other thing that is you can use these tools. So previously, you couldn't go use Oracle if you were in B2B sales. You couldn't use Oracle if you were selling Oracle solutions, but you can use large language models, and you can. And if you have not done this, please do this. Go use DeepSeek. Go use Grok 3 and understand the difference between a large language model and a reasoning model, and just open DeepSeek and ask it a math question and watch it go. It's absolutely unbelievable, its capability. So yeah, that you got to lean into it, right, Scott? And the other point that you made, I completely agree with. People often ask me, they say, Ben, do you miss being in frontline sales? And I did technology and then outsourcing, big ticket outsourcing for so many years, and I've always said no. But now with AI, I agree with you. I think a lot of people are seeing the threat, but I'm seeing only upside for those sellers who really want to do this.
Yes.
And the analogy that I keep using is it's like catching a wave. And when you're lying on the surfboard and you're looking over your shoulder at the horizon, looking for the wave, and you see the AI wave coming along, that's your research, right? That's like, I'm trying to, and then what do you have to do to catch the wave? You have to paddle like crazy to get on that wave. But once you're on it, and that's almost like, once you're on it, you can ride this thing and support and help so many customers. And you've talked a lot about challenges today that customers have, and that's what we do, isn't it? We problem solve in sales.
Yeah, and I think to extend your analogy a little bit, this is going to be a really, really big wave. And there's a surf spot near me called Mavericks where they have some of the world's biggest waves. And to get on those waves, they actually have a jet ski pull you onto the wave and then race off of it. And then you ride these 50-foot waves. And that jet ski is your subject matter experts that you bring into the meeting with you. They're the ones that help you get up to speed fast. And the more time you spend in front of customers, understanding with your subject matter experts, understanding the technology, the further down the wave you go. Because this is a really, really big wave. This isn't like a 5-foot wave. This is a 50-foot wave. And there's a lot of people that are going to get crushed by this wave. And there's going to be a few people that shoot out of it looking really good and having had a really fun ride, right? For the thrill seeker sales guys, this is that 50-foot Mavericks wave that everybody dreams about. That's a big board, big waves surfer.
Yeah. Look, that's brilliant. I think we'll at that point we'll wrap. And I also think the jet ski is partly driven by your subject matter expert, but also massively driven by your sales leader. Yeah. And I think for sales, maybe we'll bring you back on, Scott, and talk about a little bit more about the behaviors of sales leaders now. This is the time more than ever, because everybody's nervous about this. Everybody's nervous in sales, and that's leadership, right? You've got to lead from the front.
Yep. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Just embrace the change. Go out there, have a learning mindset. Everybody talks about a growth mindset, and it's not that hard. There's tons of information out there. What's hard is separating the wheat from the chaff and focusing on what's important. But there's a lot of information, and you can get smart pretty easily. use AI to help you. I ask AI all the time about AI, and it helps me understand it.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
use an app called Perplexity AI because it actually gives me references and footnotes, so I can go back and check the sources. Because I'm always worried about in those big models the bias that might be there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. 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 Excellent. Okay. Good tip there. Perplexity AI. Everyone can go check that out. Look, Scott, it's been brilliant. Look, you're a good friend, and as well as a professional sales legend. So it's great to see you again. I promise next time I come over to your house, I'm bringing a bottle of wine. But it might be one of those mini ones off off the
Up there.
aeroplane. I don't know. I don't know. But look, it's been absolutely great. Have a great day, and thank you so much. And we'll see each other again soon, Scott. See you
Thanks,
soon.
man. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank
Good
you
luck,
so much.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye bye. Bye bye.